My name's Amani Savi. My background is that I'm a registered nurse. I worked in Mackay for 5 years as a registered nurse, and it was there that I decided that I wanted to go back and do medicine. I've been at Bond University now for 5 years. This is my final year as a medical student, and since I've been here, I've been contributing my passion, I guess, with rural and remote medicine by being part of the Rural Health Club. So I've served as a Vice President, President and Treasurer, and our Rural Health Club here at Bond University is really just to try and engage students in what rural medicine is all about, try to get them to go out and network with doctors that live rurally, try and get them to see a different type of medicine. When I was a nurse working in Mackay, there was not one Australian qualified trained doctor in the hospital, and I thought that was pretty poor, considering Mackay is not even really that rural, it's more regional. And I thought, if we don't even have Australian qualified doctors in regional areas, what have we got rurally? So that was my big drive to come back and do medicine so that I could give back to the bush and help close the gap, which is something I'm very passionate about. I've decided to spend my last year as a final year student in a town called Inglewood, which is actually 3 hours west, which for a lot of people seems a long way away. I think of it as just a bit of a stone's throw. It's a town of 1,200 people. It's a 2 GP town at the moment, so it'll be 2 GPs and a student when I'm there. But I think that I'll get a lot more experience there. I'm the only student, funnily enough, that's taken up the opportunity in my final year to go rural, but I just think it will be fantastic because I'll feel like I'm already there. I'll feel like I'm making a difference. I'll have started building community ties with an area that I would hope to go back to when I'm finished, and I'll still see everything that everybody in the city will see. In fact, I'll probably see more. I think there are lots of differences between working rurally and working in a metropolitan centre. I personally think there's a lot more advantages to working rurally. Some would disagree. The biggest advantages I see, or the biggest draw cards I see for living in a rural area, would be the fact that you're part of a community, the sense of community, the close-knit community. That's all a big draw card for me. It helps with the continuity of care with your patients. You're actually able to look after your patients not just from what they present when they come into the clinic, but because you know who they live with, where they live, what their background issues are with the family, you're able to treat them much more holistically. You obviously also see those same patients coming through the clinic. It's not a GP bulk billing in-out sort of a situation, so I love that. I also love the fact that you make a real difference when you're of somebody in this profession in a small community. I love the fact that you don't sit in traffic for 3 hours, so I must admit that that gives me more time to horse ride, so that's a big plus. You can live in the city and be 5 kilometres away from the hospital but be in traffic for an hour each way, so that's just wasted time to me. I'd rather be practising medicine or spending time with my family. I guess because I lived rurally for those first few years of my life, and although I only have a few memories of it, they were the best memories of my life, and I'd like to be able to recreate that for my daughter. So they're the big draw cards. There's also obviously disadvantages with working rurally. Sometimes your access to resources is not as good. Your ability to promote yourself within your chosen career can be somewhat stunted. But I think if you're passionate to be there and you've got the drive, then you've got the ability to continue your profession wherever you are. And I think it's a big blessing that you could give to people in rural areas, and they could involve you in their life, in their personal life. So in saying that, that's an advantage and a disadvantage. People will be your patients, but they'll also be your friends. So you do have to be able to draw that line between being their doctor and being their friend, but at the same time, it's such a privilege. If a student was to come to me and ask me what are the 3 things I need to know to go rural, I would say this. 1, get involved in everything you can when you're out there. Get involved in the local sporting club. Say yes to every experience. If someone says, come and muster my cattle for the weekend, do it. That's the best thing you can do, is get involved in the community, because it's the sense of community and that close-knit environment that's a real draw card for anyone who goes rural. And if you don't experience it, then you've gone out and missed out on that. The second thing I would say is take something to do in your quiet times, because there are going to be quiet times. There's no movies, there's no bowling alleys, there's no pub or club generally. So take some creative writing, take some music, take some paint, do some artwork, find yourself in the bush and actually spend that time learning to develop yourself. The third thing I would say is be on the ball with your clinical knowledge. You don't have a lab down the road, you don't have an MRI machine or a CT scan down the road. Your patients would maybe have to travel 2 or 3 hours to get to those types of things. So be up to date on your clinical knowledge, know how to diagnose from clinical signs, really listen to your patients and know how to do a good history, because 80% of your diagnosing can be done from a history if you do it well. So they'd be the 3 big things that I'd tell any student going rurally. The best experience I've had in a rural setting is when I worked as a student on placement with a GP in St George. So St George is a small town 6 hours from Brisbane, and I was lucky to be placed with a GP who had worked in the town for 40 years. The best part about working with her was that I got to see how she approached her patients and their care. So as an example, a patient came to see her who had a mental health issue. She was not just able to treat that person with what they told her in the actual interview. She was able to treat them from a holistic point of view. She knew their mother, their father, their brothers, their sisters. So she was able to globally, in a way, look after this patient. And it just astounded me at the end of the day that we saw about 20 patients. Every single patient had a different issue, so there was not one issue that was repetitive. So people who say when you go rural you only do the same thing over and over, they're definitely wrong. Every patient we saw was different, but every patient we saw, she knew the background of them. She knew, oh, they're the teacher that work at such and such. It's been really tough down at the school lately, so that's why she's probably come to us with this problem. That ability to have the knowledge of how to treat her patient better and look after her patient, the ability to holistically look after them, and the continuity of care that you could see she had for all of her patients, that was a big wow moment for me. That's what really cemented my idea of being a rural GP, because you just can't do that in the city. And so that was a really big moment for me. Something that really changed my worldview was when I was a student on placement in a little island called Elcho Island. It's a little island off the top coast of Australia, about 2 hours flight from Darwin. It's a community of about 2,500 Aboriginal people. And when I went there, I was so excited. It was the first placement I was doing in a really rural Indigenous community, and I was excited to see all the different health challenges that they faced and the way I could make a difference. However, when I got there, I had a real, oh my goodness, am I still in Australia moment. It was like I'd landed in a third world country. It was just heart-wrenching. It was so sad to see people who are Australians not having access to healthcare, not having the types of services that urban Australians have, and just being so far out of the way. So yes, it was a 2-hour flight away, but there was hardly any fruits and vegetables on the island. The ability to have a nice house on the island, the ability to have clothes and shoes that were appropriate for the weather, all of those things were just lacking. And it really opened up my eyes to, oh yes, we do have a gap, and we have this Close the Gap campaign, and it's there for a reason. But wow, we really need to be working on it a lot more than what we are. And we can keep saying we're working on this Close the Gap, but we really need to be working on the Close the Gap, because it's just not happening at the moment. So that was a real moment for me. And I think that's, again, the reason I want to go rural, is because not only do lots of Indigenous populations and communities not have access to health services, there's also lots of farming and mining communities that also don't have access. So it goes across the board that we need more doctors off the east coast of Australia to go west. And if I can be just one of those GPs that does that, then at least I'll have made some difference.